Hey loved ones, I'm Keyosha. It's pronounced Keyosha, meaning key of the ocean. I'm a life coach and a motivational speaker, known for my company Key Coaching, which focuses on self-betterment. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you what I've learned from being a coach. I'll provide you the keys not just to survive, but to thrive. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesdays. And I'm just glad you're here. I'm going to be talking about a topic that I feel like is another tough one. People usually feel like they don't want to talk about it. It's systemic racism. So the first thing I'm going to say, disclaimer, we're already aware. It's not a preferred topic of discussion. What you may not realize is we actually do not want to discuss it either. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that people just wish it wasn't a thing so that it would subsequently not be a topic for discussion. But unfortunately, it is a topic for discussion. And I think that the best way to remove systemic racism or try to fix the problem is to actually openly discuss it and talk about it and be aware of what it is so that you know how to spot it, so that you know how to say something if you see something, and so that we can all make a change together. So it seems normal, which is what makes it hard to see. So ultimately, you have to look closely. It's basically embedded into institutions like schools, workplaces, sports. A lot of structures that already exist have systemic racism finely woven into them. So to help you understand, here's an example I can give. I am Black. When I was a kid, it was rare to see toys or characters that looked like me. And back then, that was normal. So I would play with toys that looked like everyone else, for example. And I think that people didn't realize it because it was normal. And the sad part is that you don't actually notice it's there until you realize what systemic racism is, and then you can see signs of it. And it's pretty much like a structure that means that a group isn't treated as equally, whether or not it be that they have characters that represent them in the media or in shows and things that they watch, or in political positions of power, and or in toys that they play with as children. The best way to kind of break it down is systemic racism is when racism is built into institutions. Why does it exist? Because after slavery, people of color were lied about as less than in credibility and in character. And then laws were put in place to proactively prevent those lies from coming true, from coming to pass or coming to fruition. Now, when these laws are put in place, we don't actually realize that systemic racism is affecting an entire group. It's affecting whether or not they succeed in a sport, it's affecting whether or not they get a job, and it's affecting whether or not they receive their basic human rights, such as healthcare. And so when these things are being affected, like their accessibility to financial freedom, then they end up in areas that can cause them to be susceptible to significantly more turmoil. Like when you can't afford housing and you move to an area that has more affordable housing. Usually the reason why the housing is more affordable in that area is because the area might lack in certain degrees. There might be drug use, homelessness, or rundown buildings. And you're saving money, but what you're being exposed to might be cockroaches, bed bugs, and black mold. And so when you have those things against you as a result of the setup of the system, then you're more likely to be impacted in a lot of other ways. But it's hard to see from the outside in because it appears normal. It's been existing for so many centuries that it has been normalized. And when something has been normalized to the detriment of an entire demographic, then only that demographic is aware of the detrimental effects. And that's the reason why a person of color can speak in more detail on what exactly plays out during systemic racism. For me, I have in the past used my middle name because it was easier for people to say and remember. And I remember applying online for a position for a job. And first they called me and they saw my qualifications. They were excited to talk with me and do an over the phone interview. And they start asking me questions and I'm knocking them, out of the park one by one. Boom, boom, boom. And I could tell that it was going really well. And, I tried to be charismatic, complimentary and comedic. And I was really happy because when I heard back and I realized that it was moving to the next step of having an in-person audition, I almost knew that I had an opportunity and that I could be employed through this company. And so when my in-person interview was scheduled, I was excited, enthusiastic, and ready for the day. I made sure to look my best, feel my best, be rested, well fed, and be cognitively alert to be sharp and be chosen. But my middle name isn't the same as my first name. Tiana doesn't have the same cultural origin as Keyosha. And so when I walked into the interview, I could already realize that the person had a mental discrepancy for the image that they had preconceived based on my name. I could see it on their face, their body language and demeanor as they shook my hand. And I mean, this has happened more than once, and that's the reason why I'm not going to chalk it up to that one time. But it's like the first time you're experiencing it, you still put your best foot forward. You sit in front of that person and you speak from a place of persuasion, confidence, because you know that you're eligible, if not overqualified, for the position. But you don't actually realize that it may be a waste of time. That person already has decided not to hire you because of the demographic that you belong to. Despite knowing you personally, their image of you has deterred them so far as to change the course of your life, where you will work, what your income will be, and what qualifications you'll gain from climbing the corporate ladder. And so these are ways that systemic racism can affect our day-to-day lives. And that's the most frustrating part. If you're trying your best to get ahead in your life, reach your full potential, and be successful, one of the things that you can never equate for is systemic racism. The system definitely exists. Every time that we're told that we can't wear our hair the way that we want to wear it because it goes against dress codes in places of employment or academic facilities, it goes against us ethnically when we're trying to wear color or be ourselves in a cultural way. We're told again that it goes against dress code. But what makes it unfair is that on the flip side of the coin, there's exceptions made for people who are not of color wearing the same dashiki at a Halloween party as a costume. And so when we're witnessing these things, it is difficult because we're observing it and we feel it is unfair. But then we don't have a platform or a safe space to speak on it and find a solution because we're told that it doesn't exist, or, you know, that person's attire is different in such a way, or, you know, Cindy or Susie having dreads is okay because they look different on Cindy and Susie than me having dreadlocks and going to work or school. But they don't realize that unfairness is what is upholding the system. That's what's keeping the system in place. And when we try to take back our power, for example, using the N-word, which is like obviously different in opinion from person to person. So some people might be like, okay, it's the N-word and I am Black, so I can say it. And other people are like, I don't feel comfortable, so I don't say it. But really, it's from person to person. It's their preference. If one person decides to speak a certain way as an adult with the right of freedom of speech, we should all be treated as individuals when it comes to our rights to have freedom of speech, no? Like, if someone chooses to use the swear words like the F word and so on, it seems like it's totally fine to allow those people to have that freedom of speech. They're an adult and that's okay, you know? But then when it comes to words that are specific to your culture or specific to your demographic, then it becomes a problem. But what's the most odd part is that it's like a problem for the person who actually belongs to that demographic to use a word. Like, I remember the discussion about LGBTQ using the word queer and fag. But I also felt like if it's an issue for the word to be used, then wouldn't the person who belongs to the demographic choose whether or not it's an issue? Now, I'm not trying to say that this means that there should be one person advocating for whether or not it is okay for language to be used. There's nothing more frustrating than being in a place where I'm just trying to work to make a living, and then somebody comes up and approaches me and asks me whether or not it's okay to talk about my culture or certain things that have to do with my race, because I'm not the advocate for the entire Black race. And so it's another form of enforcing a systemic structure into something that is a person by person basis. I met somebody who was half Native and half Jamaican while I was in Mexico, but his opinion was that he was Native because he didn't know his Jamaican family. There are people who are mixed, half Black and half Asian, that consider themselves fully Black or fully Asian or Blasian. But it's really and truly a person by person basis. And this is why the systemic aspect of racism is so dangerous, is because it implements no wiggle room for the unique and authentic aspect of dealing with each individual on a person to person basis. You look at somebody who is, I don't know, in a house where a toilet clogs, for example. This is just a personal example. And you detain them. You know what I mean? Literally put them in handcuffs, pat them down, bring them to a holding cell. You know what I mean? Try them and try to convict them for vandalism. But in the same circumstance where someone else might be in a house where a toilet clogs, that person might be given like aid and help because it's a toilet clogging and they clog all the time. And so people would never guess that, like, I have been detained and charged with mischief and vandalism because I was in a house when a toilet clogged. But as a result of the system, the authority that arrived actually thought that I was more dangerous and malicious than I was in the moment. And it was based on my physical appearance, which isn't even chosen by me, obviously, right? Like, I didn't knock on my mom's womb and say, like, can I live here for 9 months or whatever? You don't mind? And just crash, and then can I exit through your vagina? Is that okay with you? Thanks, Trevor Noah. So when you think about the fact that the person who has that race or belongs to that demographic doesn't even choose that demographic, that's when you realize how illogical systemic racism is, because you're applying a system or rules to a demographic that doesn't even choose that demographic. It would be different if they actually chose it, but it just doesn't make any sense. And I wanted to show a video that I found hilarious because it's from a guy called Jolly Good Ginger on TikTok. And he literally talks about the fact that, like, the N-word, a lot of people who are not of color talk about how people shouldn't be able to say the N-word no matter who they are. But what's interesting is the origin of the N-word. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it was originated from people who were enslaving Black people, and then they used it to try to, like, dehumanize them. And they were trying to compare the N word to the word cracker, saying like, they shouldn't be said. And the reason why I felt like the video was funny is because, well, you could see for yourself.
The N-word is just as bad as the word cracker. Here we go. And I'm going to explain to you why before you get into a big frenzy. Before you do, let's clear one thing up and get this out of the way now.
If you're comparing the badness of two words and you won't even say one of them, that's the worst word.
As we are aware,
that's pretty much all I wanted to show from that video because I feel like it's hilarious. It's literally like, if you're comparing the badness of two words, the word you can't say it wins. And then it goes into the base of the words and the fact that the word that starts with an N was originated to demoralize and dehumanize Black people. But the word cracker was originated from the people who were enslaved, referring to the slave owner's crack of a whip. This is the reason why people don't like the topic of discussion, systemic racism. This is why it feels friendlier to go with my original idea of reading a kid's book about systemic racism. But I feel like that doesn't give enough benefit of the doubt to people's ability to talk about a tough topic like this. I don't feel like it needs to be sugar-coated, and I don't think that individuals need to be buttered up about it because that is what's been happening thus far. And it's preventing people from saying something when they see something. So, for the people who experience systemic racism, be aware that some of the side effects are sadness and anger. Our immediate reaction is just obviously being displeased with what you're experiencing and why it has to happen to you. Especially because every single day that we go to sleep and we wake up, go pee, like I already said, is the first thing that we do. Hop in the shower, brush our teeth, get ready for the day. Whether or not we write in a journal, meditate, get dressed in a graphic tee or a suit, when we leave our house, we don't actually realize or remember that we belong to any demographic. It's not actually until you turn that handle and step out into the world that you remember that you are a woman that is vulnerable to danger. It's not until you get followed in the aisles of a grocery store that you realize, oh yeah, I'm Black. And so, yeah, it can make you feel sad because the happy-go-lucky aspect of your outlook on life, the way that you see the world, I don't even see myself as Black. Not unless I actually hold my hands in front of my eyes and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm Black. Or look in a mirror, But when I'm looking in a mirror, I'm not seeing a Black woman. I'm just seeing Keyosha. So it's important for us to say something if we see something. That's the direction of change. To make a change, make sure to be aware of your surroundings. Call it like you see it. Raise awareness. Check in with yourself and how you're feeling when you've experienced systemic racism, and try to talk about it with the people that are with you so that they are aware of when it's happening as well. so that if it's not happening to you when they're not with you, but it's happening to somebody else, that they might be able to step in and stop it in its tracks. Because the more often that we stop it from taking place, the more often that the dog stops getting a treat for bad behavior. Because another way of being rewarded for bad behavior is getting away with it. I mean, I feel like every person in their life has probably like stolen a candy bar or something, you know? But it's wrong and you don't do it for your life. But initially, I think that feeling of exhilaration, if you continue to get away with it or, you know, nobody ever talks to you about it, is that high that people are trying to get. Because there is such a thing as white privilege that means that you're almost like invincible in a way, like you can get away with it. It doesn't matter what you say or what you do. If you're speeding, if you're stealing, if you're singling out a group, you can get away with it because you know that you have that white privilege. And so when the cop pulls you over, you might be joking around as opposed to admitting to what you did wrong. You might even engage in conversation, and you might even know somebody on the police force. And so these privileges that don't exist are the exact reason why it's difficult for someone from a certain racial demographic or different for a person of color to try to navigate when they're getting pulled over simply for how they look and not actually breaking any laws. So you have no idea how much of a change that you can make in someone's life when you actually step in and say something. You might even save a life. And that's what people aren't realizing, is that they might actually save a life. So now we know where systemic racism originated, different places where you can find it, ways that it's kept in place institutionally and systemically, and examples of how it could occur, but also what to do when we witness it. From there, we can't really make excuses on what we can and cannot do. For the sadness, it's always good to have in your back pocket something that you can remember that makes you happy, amazing moments, or a safe place in your mind. If you need to take a minute and go there, I suggest you do so. And for anger, usually it's heavy on the chest. It feels hot and compressed and tight and stressed. And so actually stretching that out and opening yourself up again keeps you from taking that anger out on the next person or problem. Because misdirected anger is also going to get you in trouble. So I meant to say, grab a notebook, grab a pen. This is a tough topic. And yeah, there you have it. So, song suggestion of the week is Crown by Stormzy. Enjoy. It's a banger, folks. Take it in. Thanks for joining me. See you next week. Bye.